then we also two additional speakers, Ms. Eve Shields and Ms. Roisin Bailey. Unfortunately, Roisin isn't able to join us for the presentation, but she has pre-recorded her talk, so her talk will be pre-recorded at the end. And both Eve and Roisin are public contributors in the new Independent Research Ethics Committee, drawing on their personal experiences as care leavers. So just in terms of housekeeping, before we go any further, we'll have all three speakers speak in a row. And if everyone can just hold their questions until the end, and we'll have hopefully have a bit of time for questions and answers at the end of the meeting. And to ask questions, you can either use the raise hand function, or if you prefer, type your question into the chat box. And once all three speakers have finished, I'll jump back in and coordinate all the questions coming through. So at this moment, I will pass over to Dr. Edel Tierney, and she'll be our first speaker today. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you very much, Lucy. Hello, everybody. My name is Edel Tierney. I am National Research Officer with Tusla Child and Family Agency, and Tusla is also a national partner on the National PPI Ignite Network. I'm delighted to be here today to present at this fourth seminar. I've been following closely the other seminars, and I've really enjoyed the content, and we are delighted to be part of the seminar series on hearing children and young people's voices in research. I'm here today with Eve Shields and Roisin Bailey, and we want to talk to you about how Tusla has been embedding PPI in their practice and policy. We're going to be drawing on one very specific example, as Mark said, and that example is how we brought public contributors onto our newly established Independent Research Ethics Committee. So I'm just going to share a few slides with you, and we'll take it from there. I hope that everybody can see those okay. Okay, so just for those of you who don't know who Tusla are or what they do, well, Tusla is the national state agency for children and family services in Ireland. So we provide children and families across child protection, welfare, fostering, family support, adoption, domestic gender-based violence, residential services, psychological services, educational support, and early years services. I've just put up a screenshot here of our website, which was developed by young people, for young people, to explain what Tusla do. It's called Changing Futures. So if you would like to take a look to see what Tusla do and have it explained in a way that's very accessible for everybody, but particularly for children and young people, I'd advise you to go to that website. It's very nicely done. In terms of PPI in Tusla and how we have been bringing PPI into Tusla's operations, well, I suppose the first thing to say is that Tusla's founding legislation, the Child and Family Agency Act, it places a very strong emphasis on partnership and cooperation with children and families in the delivery of our services. It also has a requirement to seek the views of our service users as a collective in service planning and review. Indeed, our corporate plan for 21 to 23, within that, our mission statement says that we are dedicated and committed to working in partnership with children, families and their communities to ensure that children in need or at risk of harm are supported and connected to people who can safeguard and promote their well-being. So I guess PPI really does underpin all of our operations. We also have a child and youth participation strategy, and this sets out Tusla's plans to support, nurture and celebrate participatory practice within Tusla and its funded agencies. And indeed, we do monitor that participation strategy on an annual basis to see where we're at in terms of how children and young people's voices are being heard. Now, this participation strategy was developed and guided by the Lundy model. And I know that you had Professor Laura Lundy open your seminar series, and you're probably all very familiar with that Lundy model. I'll just say a few words about it in a few minutes. Within our practice on the ground, our national approaches to practice, so the science of safety and the metal approaches to practice, these have principles embedded in them, such as inclusion and the co-production with children, families and their networks. And indeed, in my own office, the National Research Office, we endeavour to keep children and young people's voices at the core of our work programme in all of the research that happens across Tusla. So, for example, we've recently commissioned a child research study on hearing the experiences and the views of children and young people who have been in child protection and welfare. We have developed a PPI approach in the research ethics application, and there's a very specific question around how researchers have embedded PPI in their research projects. And specifically, we'd like to talk to you today about how we have public contributors on our newly established Tusla's Independent Research Ethics Committee. I know many of you are very familiar with the Lundy model, but I suppose to put it in the context of how we go about PPI within Tusla, we do recognise, as per Article 12 of the UN Convention, a child's right to have their views sought, to express their views, and to have them given due weight. But in order to do that, they need to be given the space, they need to have their voices heard, they need to have the audience to hear those voices, but also what it comes down to here is who hears those voices and how can that influence what happens. And I guess in our case, when we're talking about influence, we are talking about how does that influence the development of our services, how does that influence our policy, and indeed how can we contribute to the wider landscape of child and family services in Ireland and in society. In terms of our own definition of PPI in research, in this context in Tusla, we mean everyone, children, young people, those attending our services, including potential service users. We also include parents, carers, guardians, staff members, and anybody who is involved in the care and protection of children and young people. And again, by involvement, we mean active involvement by all of those stakeholders in a research process. So we don't include involvement as participants or as subjects in a research study. We do not consider it as the collection of data from those. It is more about how they're involved in the research process. And I know we've had many discussions across the PPI network and at various different meetings we've had about definitions and so on. So to bring us to our presentation today, the development of the Tusla Independent Rec, well, I'm delighted to say that our Independent Research Ethics Committee is now established. It was due to meet for the first meeting on June the 3rd, and unfortunately, due to the recent cyber attack, that meeting had to be cancelled. But we are hoping that it will resume and take flight in the coming weeks. It's an independent, impartial committee of the agency. It's formally approved by the Tusla board, and it reports to a subcommittee of that board. The operations of the Research Ethics Committee is supported by ourselves in the National Research Office. How we came to this, I suppose, goes back more than a year ago, more like 18 months now, where we were supported by PPI Ignite at NUI Galway and Edel Murphy there, and also at PPI Ignite at Trinity College with Michael Foley. And we held roundtable discussion with a variety of stakeholders, including academics, public contributors, research ethics committee members, Tusla staff, people who had an interest in PPI, about how we might go about having public contributors on an independent research ethics committee. And that really guided us in terms of how we were moving forward. Those discussions, we developed an expression of interest, which was sent out through our various networks. And I know that even Roshan will tell you a little bit about how they got involved and how that process happened for them. Recruitment was via a skills match program. And we now have a committee which is chaired by Dr. Patricia Kennedy. Dr. Patricia Kennedy is a lecturer in St. Angela's in Sligo and also at UCC. And we have 6 external or public contributors, 4 professional external contributors, and 6 Tusla staff. A little bit about where our applications come from. Well, they come from students in universities, they come from PIs in universities, they also come from Tusla staff. We do get quite a number of applications from across a variety of our services that I described earlier on. And I guess over the years, we have found that we are becoming increasingly relevant in terms of university research, and that's where many of our research ethics applications come from. In setting up the Tusla Independent Research Ethics, we then developed an induction training. I know Eve is going to talk to you a little bit about that. And in that induction training, I suppose we covered everything from what is research ethics, what does research ethics look like in a child protection, welfare, child and family support service context, what might happen in the case of a distress occurring. We talked about the research ethics application form itself. We talked about the terms of reference of the Research Ethics Committee. And we did some trial runs with some mocked up forms so that the committee could get an opportunity to practice a research ethics approval. So that's enough about that from me. I'd like to hand over to Eve, who is going to tell you about her own journey to becoming a public contributor on our Independent Research Ethics Committee. Thank you. Over to you now, Eve.
Hello everyone, my name is Eve Shields and I have...
sorry Eve, just before you start, oh you're okay, sorry, I was just going to get Edel to stop sharing her screen. Thank you very much, Edel. Go ahead, Eve.
Okay, hello everyone, my name is Eve Shields and I have recently completed my training to become a member of the Independent Research Ethics Committee for Tusla. I am a care leaver from County Galway and I have just finished my first degree at the National University of Ireland Galway last month. I first heard about the opportunity to become part of the Tusla Independent Research Ethics Committee in late 2020, when a facilitator from TAG, the Tusla Advisory Group, thought I would be perfect for the position. I was told that both my extensive knowledge of ethics from my philosophy degree and my 2 years' experience of working in advocacy for young people in care, both with TAG and EPIC, empowering young people in care, could act as a valuable contribution to the committee overall. When I submitted my application to the Independent Research Ethics Committee, I then participated in a skills match interview, where I met Dr. Patricia Kennedy, the chair, and Tusla staff Lynn Hertz and Pat Osborne. They asked me a list of relevant questions, such as why I thought I'd be right for the position, and also discussed what the position would entail. I made it clear in the interview that my experience as a care leaver had already acted as a valuable contribution to various projects I had been a part of in the past, such as the reformation of the Child Care Act, where I had a meeting with the Department of Children and Youth Affairs and discussed parts of the Act that were relevant to both care experience and aftercare. The interview was extremely welcoming, and I felt as though my voice as a care leaver, as well as my knowledge gathered from my undergraduate degree, was a valuable asset. And a few weeks later, I was offered the opportunity to become part of the committee, and the training started in late March of 2021. Despite the global pandemic, the training was set up over Microsoft Teams, and the preparation and commitment by both the facilitators and other REC members was one that was admirable. There were 6 sessions in total, with an introduction session, which allowed every member to introduce themselves. I learned that this committee was made up of PhD students, social workers, and other impressive contributors to society overall. Everyone seemed to have an interest and experience in the importance and welfare of children and families in Ireland. I felt extremely privileged to be among such talented and knowledgeable people, and I really looked forward to getting to know the other members and realised we all had something to bring to the table that could really make this committee a valuable asset, both Tusla and future research in general. The other sessions featured amazing guest speakers such as Mandy Lee from Trinity College Dublin. She gave us a lesson in ethical research, which was both fascinating, but also provided us with a starting point for what exactly ethical approval is when it comes to research, and why it is so important, especially when it comes to vulnerable participants such as children. The training was also given by Tusla staff, where we learned the various hoops researchers had to go through prior, during, and after conducting research, which was useful to know going forward. The most helpful parts of the training were when we were broken up into smaller groups to discuss the potential risks, the benefits, to look out for when analysing future research as a committee. In these smaller groups, I got the opportunity to just discuss the certain vulnerabilities and added risks children in care may face in research, such as potential triggering discussion points and how a potential lack of knowledge about the care system in Ireland can be harmful on participants. There are so many reasons for children going into care, and a researcher must never assume a situation. There are also so many different types of care areas, such as voluntary and kinship care, which often go under-acknowledged by the researcher. Overall, my experience with the Research Ethics Committee has been an extremely positive one. I've gained so much from the training, and I look forward to using my skills in the future. I also feel as though my position on this committee is a step in the right direction for the value and experience of care leavers in Ireland. It goes without saying, no one knows more about a service than someone who has lived through and experienced it. And I strongly believe this will be the case as I progress through being a part of the Independent Research Ethics Committee. So I'll hand you over to Roisin now.
Hi everyone, my name is Roisin Bailey and I'm a public contributor on Tusla's Independent Research Ethics Committee. Firstly, I'd like to send my apologies for not being able to attend the live event today. However, having heard Edel and Eve speak previously, I'm sure they did a wonderful job. Today, I'm going to be talking about 3 things in relation to the Ethics Committee. I'm going to talk about my motivation for joining, the process of applying, and the training. Firstly, my motivation for joining this committee stems from my own care experience. I went into care when I was just 10 years old, and it has definitely shaped me to becoming the person who I am today. It has pushed me to become a qualified social worker and has brought so many other opportunities. From college, I realised how much I loved research. And by that, I mean I found it so interesting to put together whatever information I had to try and understand the way the world works just even a little bit more. As a working professional, I now see the importance of research itself. I see how it can support other professionals and other people to improve their work with people. I see this committee as an opportunity to be part of something exciting and new. My experience is something I will always carry with me, and I am actually so proud to say that I am a care leaver. With that in mind, this committee is an opportunity for me to add my own voice to the table. I get to take part in discussions around a piece of research and not be afraid to voice my own opinion or bring a new perspective. The application process itself was quite simple. I believe I seen it advertised on Twitter, and from there I completed the application and sent it through via email. Following that, I got an interview date, and on that day I had the chance to talk about why I wanted to be part of the committee and why I believed I was a good fit for it. The interview process itself was very interesting, but to be honest, I thought I waffled it and I didn't think I'd be successful. On reflection, one thing I would like to mention is that I was asked during the interview about my support systems in place, should something come up that I may find distressing given the nature of some topics to be explored. This, in my opinion, was an absolutely crucial question. I understand why I was asked this, and I know that, for example, I may be triggered or offended by how someone uses certain phrases or maybe has assumptions about people in care. I know this because I have personal experience of surprising people when I tell them that I was in care and then tell them how much I have achieved. However, I do feel like this question in itself shows the importance of having public contributors with life experience on committees such as this. In my opinion, bringing life experience to the table can raise such important questions and raise observations, but it can also support a researcher to improve their work even a small bit. The induction training itself was also very interesting. Since it was during the pandemic, it was all done online. At the very start, I was very nervous about meeting the fellow members, but by session 2, I was honestly grand. I was surprised at the high standard of the committee. I'm not sure what I was expecting, but from the initial round of introductions, I was pleasantly surprised at the range of people who showed interest, whether it be for personal or professional reasons. We all bring very different perspectives, experiences and expertise. It really just seems like an ideal fit. Honestly, I feel so lucky to have been chosen to be part of this committee. It brings together people with such vast experiences, and with that comes great discussions. Every session was packed with new information and new things about research. The training gave us all an opportunity to meet virtually and get to know each other even a little bit. That said, I'm looking forward to meeting everyone in person, and I'm very much looking forward to beginning the process of reviewing applications. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Edel, Eve, and Roisin for those brilliant talks. So we have plenty of time for questions. So as I said, you should have a little reaction button at the bottom of your screen. So if you click on that, you should be able to raise your hand, and I'll try and spot you as you do. And if you want to turn on your microphone and your video, you feel free to. If you would prefer just to type your question in, please feel free to type it into the chat, and I'll try and read it out. So just while everyone is thinking about their questions, I might get started with one that I had. This question, I guess, is probably directed at Eve, if that's okay, Eve. One of the things that I think is a challenge in PPI is providing public contributors with the necessary kind of skills that they need, so that, I mean, that they in themselves feel like they can actually contribute in a meaningful way. But obviously it's a big commitment. So how did you find this process? And say, for instance, the 6 training sessions that you had to do to kind of upskill. Did you think that was was it too much of a commitment, or?
I won't lie, I was very intimidated when I went to my first meeting, because there were all these PhD students and I just finished my first undergraduate. Like, I'm going into a master's in September, but I felt like I was a bit of a baby. But it did give me a lot of reassurance to know that Roisin was there, and I've previously worked in advocacy groups, and we would have done training on how to participate in groups and stuff like that. But towards the end, I was kind of feeling like I was a valuable asset towards these people. Like, I knew stuff about the care experience that, say someone who had been doing maybe 3-4 years of social work didn't. And I kind of said that in my presentation. You can read a book all day on the care experience, but when you've lived through it, you don't need to read that book. You kind of have all the information there. So, I mean, as far as the training went, it was extremely interesting and it was easy to follow. And towards the end, I did start to feel in place, because we did have the smaller breakout rooms, and it was so easy to kind of talk to people when it's not kind of like 16 people on a screen and they all have PhDs. But otherwise, I was grand. I think anyone else kind of going into it in the future, regardless of whether they kind of have that university background, I feel like they would be okay.
And Mark, if I could just come in there, I guess, we very clearly stated in the expression of interest when we were advertising the roles that induction training was a requirement. So I suppose there were 2 reasons for that, is that we wanted everybody to be starting from a level playing pitch, that everybody was getting the same training, but also that we felt that it was giving people the capacity to contribute, their own expertise within the Research Ethics Committee, and also giving them the heads up that if they wished to become a member, that there was a requirement to attend the training. And I think that was important. So anybody who I guess applied to become a member did understand that that training was part of the undertaking from the start. Yeah.
Maybe just a quick follow-up question. Edel, you obviously chose to go with a formal interview process. I was just wondering, was there a reason behind going with a formal interview process rather than some sort of informal kind of opportunity to meet? And Eve, did you appreciate, or how did you find the interview process?
From my own experience of the interview anyway, I feel like it was necessary to do it in the way, you know, that they did it, because I feel like, okay, you are going to be touching on vulnerable aspects, you are going to be touching on vulnerable, you know, research that will have an impact on you, and you need to be prepared before you were, you know, even go into the training. So it's crucial, you know. And I feel like even if I didn't have my own care experience, I feel like the normal average person would kind of become, you know, and that's why we did actually in one of the training sessions have safety measures put in place to what would happen if somebody got overwhelmed. But I feel like they're kind of preparing you and they're giving you a taster of what's to come. And I feel like that was really, really important with the interview process. And I feel like they covered that very, very well. And Roisin would have mentioned, you know, that aspect of what as well, like, did you have a support system in place? Like, that is very important, because you do need to kind of have, you know, what to do when you do get distressed for anything, especially when it comes to vulnerable topics of research and you know, the nature of research itself.
And just to say, Mark, I guess we didn't call it a formal interview, you know, because that would have kind of come under maybe sort of a HR remit. It really came about through those roundtable discussions that we held, as I said, with PPI Ignited TCD and PPI Ignited NUI Galway, where the discussion and the contributions and the advice was that something like a skills match approach would be very relevant. So we knew we wanted Tusla staff members. We knew we wanted external professionals with an interest in research ethics, for example. We knew we wanted public contributors who were either service users or members of the public with an interest in research. But we also wanted to have that safety net, because I guess the research that happens within a Tusla context can be sensitive. It can deal with very sensitive topics. We needed to be careful that people's motivations, you know, were coming from a place where they had the interest in research rather than a different motivation. So I guess we're more comfortable with the terminology skills match, and this skills match interview was conducted with the chair of the Research Ethics Committee, with the administrator, Lynn Hertes, who's been fantastic throughout the whole process, and also with a member of staff from Tusla, Pat Osborne, and another external person from the door. Really greatly appreciated their support with that, because they were giving another lens to the interview process.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. It's really interesting to hear about. I see a question there from Lorna Kieran. Would you like to speak?
Yes, hi Mark, and hi Eve and Edel. Thanks a million for today. I have two questions. One is for Edel and one is for Eve. But just before I ask my questions, can I just comment as an ex-staff member of Tusla how wonderful it is that Tusla is a key partner on the PPI Ignite network. I think we all have a lot to learn from what Edel briefly described as an absolute systemic organisational commitment to participation and genuinely hearing the voice of children and young people. And I know Edel didn't have time to go into the Tusla Research and Information Network that exists, or the Children and Young People Services Committees that exist in every county in Ireland. But I think Tusla is really leading the way. And so I look forward to more seminars hearing about Tusla's approach to participation. So my two key questions, Edel, firstly for you, is just around I suppose acknowledging that researchers are already under a lot of pressure with their institutional ethics, research ethics process. Is there something kind of unique or additional about the Tusla research ethics process that researchers could be aware of or could be considering before they go for research ethics permission? And Eve, a question, and congratulations on your graduation and very best of luck in your master's. And it's been so lovely to hear from you, and I'm delighted you're a part of the Ethics Committee. My question for you, Eve, is one of the pieces of feedback I've heard from some young people around ethics applications is the language can be quite complicated and dense. Was that your experience? And do you have any plans, do you think, as a committee to look at how to simplify the language or how to simplify the process? And particularly given that perhaps some young people might have learning difficulties, is there any conversation or dialogue to date around how to make that more accessible as a process? So maybe Edel, is it okay if I go to you first and leave Eve kind of have a think about that? Thanks.
Thanks, Lorna. Lovely to see you again. And thank you for mentioning our research and information mentors and the CIPSEs around the country. I suppose just to say today that our focus was really very much around PPI in research, and then very much with the focus on the Research Ethics Committee. But yes, acknowledging that there is a lot of other work that's happening across Tusla, as you're well aware. In terms of the systemic approach to the research ethics application, I guess there are quite a number of areas that are different in terms of the research ethics application process for the researcher applying to Tusla versus maybe their own university. And a lot of that is really that gatekeeping exercise that Tusla needs to ensure that they have in place. And I mean, and that really is the key to ensuring that vulnerable service users, families, and so on are protected. And, we have Tusla staff members right across our agency, right across the services, who support researchers in their to conduct research. So, for example, in a research ethics application, I'll just give you one example. We would look for a gatekeeper's approval for the research to be conducted within a particular area. There are a couple of reasons for that. One of them is to ensure that there isn't a research burden or that there isn't research fatigue in a particular research area, which, as you can imagine, could happen very easily, and it does happen. The second reason is that those gatekeepers need to be aware of where the vulnerabilities exist and how might they be mitigated, how might informed consent be assured, who might support the researcher in accessing those participants and supporting the participants to make informed choices about whether or not they want to get involved in the research. We would look for that gatekeeper's approval so that that is all in place and the researcher can then work with the gatekeeper in that area. So that's just one example. I suppose we also look for completion of children's first training. That is a requirement. And in particular then when there are research applications that are dealing with vulnerable children or vulnerable situations, we would look for Garda vetting. So they're just some of the issues that maybe are slightly particular to the research ethics application.
Super helpful. Thanks, Edel.
And my question then, from what I can remember, you said, I believe you touched on language, like certain language. So I'll just answer from what I can remember you asked, and maybe then Edel can help me after. But I mean, I suppose the most helpful thing, like there is always a lack of acknowledgement and a slight ignorance kind of when it comes to, in some cases now, definitely not in all, but I mean, not knowing enough about the care experience in Ireland and not knowing the appropriate way to speak to a care leaver. Like there's a massive difference between a child the age of 7 and a child the age of 16. And just knowing kind of how to talk to that person, not kind of babying them, not, coddling them, and giving it to them in an appropriate language. Another really useful tool, which is something we even discussed in the training, was, the aid of advocacy groups. We have 2 amazing advocacy groups in Ireland for children in care, which are actually child-centered. They have a younger youth council and they have an older youth council. And this is such a useful tool because it's actually a group of young people who actually work in advocacy and represent the voices of children in Ireland and have aided so many research projects in the past. And I mean, that they would be the most useful to use. I suppose when it comes to as well researching children in care, from my experience and kind of from what I've learned, is we had this saying in the group where it was reinventing the wheel, and it was research that keeps coming up and keeps coming up and keeps coming up. And I mean, for my own university degree, I would have noticed that a lot of research done on children in care is residential. And there's not a lot of focus on voluntary or kinship care. And I can understand why that would be more challenging, obviously, for, GDPR and stuff like that, and to actually have to go to 2 sets of guardians as opposed to 1. But I mean, that would be just so amazing if more focus was put on that, and you know, they actually took the time to jump through those hoops, because I feel like not enough research is done on it and not enough people know enough about it. So I would really like to see that going forward, myself.
Thanks very much, Eve. And I suppose another kind of part of my question was just the actual research ethics form itself, the language that Tusla currently uses to ask the questions. Is that easy to understand, do you think, for younger researchers, maybe, you know, in terms of your own age group or younger, who might be interested in applying to Tusla for research permission?
Yes, I mean, I'm only 22, but from my reading of the Tusla website, yes, I did think it was simple enough to understand, from somebody of a younger age. So I don't feel like it's an intimidating process at all. I mean, the staff are also lovely to talk to. The website is kind of laid out, and after the cyber crash, there is actually a really good portal that they can use, and it is kind of a step-by-step process, and it's kind of foolproof if you've done the preparation and you know kind of what you're doing.
Super. Look forward to seeing it. Thanks so much.
And Lorna, I might just add there as well that when we were developing the research ethics application form, we did do a very wide consultation on the content and the language. And I suppose we did go through various iterations of the application form to get it in its current format. And also we discussed the research ethics application at the induction training to get the views of the newly on the language and the content. And just one other issue about language, I guess we would also look for researchers to provide their letter of information and their letter of informed consent in an accessible format for the appropriate cohort, whether that was children or young people. And we would expect to see that those letters would be written in an adapted way and a suitable format for the particular cohort.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, both.
Lorna, I just add one last thing. One of my roles, I'm actually also a member of the newly formed National Research Ethics Committee, which has just kicked off as well. And I think it's important, you raised a lot of important points. There needs to be a lot more integration of research ethics committees across the entire country, because I mean, it's very obvious that certain committees have far more expertise to assess and specific research topics, and I mean, this is a perfect example where a Tusla approval from an independent research committee is probably far more valuable than any other research ethics approval for research on this topic. So it is something that I think that the National Research Ethics Committee will hope towards moving towards to try and streamline the process a little bit throughout Ireland, but I think it's going to be a kind of long and slow process. And language is also something that the National Research Ethics Committee really wants to emphasize and start looking at developing kind of explanatory kind of guidance for how to develop and produce effective consent forms, because I think it's a problem right across the board. I see Ruth has a question.
Yeah.
Do you want to jump in?
Thanks, Mark. Just to say congratulations to Edel and Eve and Roisin in her absence on excellent presentations. I learned so much listening to the three of you, so thank you. And I suppose what I'm wondering about, and Eve or Edel, whoever wants to take the question is fine. I'm wondering about the relationship building within the group and what you did to build those relationships, because what you've done is really innovative. You've brought people from different backgrounds around the same table, if you like, with a common kind of purpose and goal. And I think it's really innovative and a model really that should be replicated. So I'm wondering what, because listening to the people, it sounds like people felt comfortable and were welcomed. And I'm wondering what you did to build relationships within your group.
Eve, do you want to take that, or would you like me to take it?
I'll take a bit and you can take the rest, I think.
Sure, yeah.
But I mean, as a participant, I found it was a lot easier when the smaller groups were put into place, and I would have said that before. I really feel like a smaller group does help. But, everyone was really, really nice. Everyone was coming from a place of care and everyone had a genuine interest in doing the same thing. And I feel like once you hit that on the head, you automatically have a connection with people, regardless of their age or where they are. And, you know, considering it was all done online, you know, everyone was so nice, and there was the odd chitter chatter here and there. It wasn't always about research. But I feel like when we do all meet in person, there will be a really nice atmosphere. And, you know, it was nice as well when risk was being discussed and the potential of, you know, coming across sensitive material, that, you know, we were discussing buddy systems. Like if one person got upset and wanted to leave the room, that, you know, it would be nice for another member to go out and check if they're okay. And you know, that's just really, really nice. And all of our phone numbers were given out towards the end as well. And we were told if we wanted to contact each other, we could. And I mean, like, you know, I've had an automatic connection with Roisin because of my own experience with Roisin. And that was really, really nice and helpful that she was able to open up. And after she was, I was. And there was no judgment. And I feel as though the smaller groups really helps. And once you share a common interest in something and wanting to achieve something, and you're kind of, you know, you're doing well. And that's
super. Thanks. Even those practical examples are really helpful. The buddy system, that's a really good idea.
Yeah, and yeah, I just might add to that. First of all, I'd like to thank my colleagues in the National Research Office, Marion Bratman, Angela Feeney, Bernard Barrett, and Edel McCarthy from Workforce Learning and Development, who developed the training program. Angela and Edel in particular put a lot of thought into the induction program and how to bring people together, how to build that community. And they had some great ideas, and then the pandemic hit, and suddenly we had to change the way we were doing that and the way we thought about it. So full credit to all of them, and Lynn and Curtis, who's the administrator from the Research Ethics Committee, and also to Dr. Patricia Kennedy, who's the chair. I mean, she just did a super job at, you know, really gelling the group from the start. And I think we were all really surprised at how quickly people connected with each other, how easily the conversation flowed. And I think, you know, Ruth, there was something about there being the 6 sessions that meant we got to know each other as each session went on. And I felt that that couldn't have been achieved in any less than the 6. So from that point of view, the 6 sessions was really very helpful. About midway through, we did do a reflection piece. And I know you're very familiar with that type of facilitation, whereby we asked people to think about, well, where were they at session 1, and where do they feel they were at now? What was different, what had changed for them? And in that session, people said that that was really helpful for them to think about, even just in one word, what was different, what had changed. And a lot of people said, you know, particularly at the end of the 6 sessions, that they really felt that there were a community who got to know each other, even if it was virtual. And as Eve said, they have each other's contact details, and they have come up with great ideas themselves about how to buddy up in terms of reviewing the application forms. So, yeah.
Thanks, Edel. And I know, like, you're presenting today and it's all very fluid, and, you know, it's so easy to listen to the 3 of you present, but I know that's on the back of a lot of hard work, you know. So yeah, thanks so much for that.
Thanks. I see one question here from Adele Murphy, just in the chat box, so I'll just read it out quickly. Given the participatory ethos in Tusla and the excellent initiative with the independent rec, do you think there is the potential or plans that this rec will actually help increase the amount of research done by children, and current and previous service users? So really emphasizing the PPI in the research itself, to seek out the sorry, I'm just paraphrasing a little, seek out the research ideas and advise in terms of the feedback of the research.
Do you want me to take that one, Eve? I suppose, Mark, in the research office, we've had, for a few years now, we've had a focus on trying to bring the voice of children and young people into all of our research activities, whatever that looks like and wherever possible. So whether it's like having that contribution on the Independent Research Ethics Committee, or having that question on our research ethics application, but also looking for opportunities to bring that voice into the research activities of the office, wherever possible, and trying maybe to piggyback on some of the other participatory activities that are happening across Tusla. So for example, you know, we do contribute to the participation strategy report on an annual basis about how we are embedding the voice of children and young people in research, more specifically rather than participatory practice. In terms of hearing the voice of children and young people, we have recently commissioned a research study on how to hear the voice of children and young people in child protection and welfare, and this is a study that hasn't been done in Ireland before. In fact, it's I think there's only one other country in the world who have attempted to do that, because it's such a vulnerable area. But we felt that the best way for us to improve the service delivery in that area of child protection and welfare would be to hear the voice of children and young people in those services and what they have to say about it. So in developing the tender for that, we did go to 2 groups of young people who were attending Tusla services and asked them how we should go about the research. So what would their advice be to us in terms of, should we do a survey, should we do focus groups? We asked them what age groups we should target. We asked them, you know, what were the types of questions that we should ask, what were the things we shouldn't do. And to be honest with you, that those consultation meetings with the children and young people really formed the tender for the research, and subsequently developed the research proposal, which is now in train, and we're hoping that that project will go to fieldwork in early 2022. So they're just some examples of how we've been trying to embed it in the research process, and hopefully we'll continue to expand that wherever possible.
Brilliant. I don't think I see any new questions. I might just jump in with one further question, more for Edel, I guess. In terms of all the initiatives and the great work that Tusla is doing, have you kind of put in place processes to look at the effectiveness of your PPI initiatives? And I guess I'm thinking of it in terms of how do you actually manage the workload for the contributors and make sure that I mean it's I guess a finite resource in some senses, so making sure it's used in the most effective way.
Thanks, Mark. That's a really good question. And again, I just want to be clear that I'm speaking today on behalf of our PPI activities in research, rather than the PPI activities across Tusla in its entirety. So, you know, I know that the participation strategy in Tusla does monitor and evaluate its progress, and that is an annual report, and we contribute to that in terms of, and I'm sorry about the dog barking. But in terms, in terms of our PPI approach in research and evaluating that, we've just recently signed up to become a national partner with the PPI Ignite network, and we've been contributing to discussions about how they're going to evaluate their progress. But alongside that, in the research office, we have been developing our own proposal around what does PPI look like, PPI in research look like in the National Research Office, and how does that contribute to the PPI network. So we're currently developing some ideas around evaluation, around who our stakeholders are, mapping out our various activities. So we're at a very early stage in that, actually. But I think, you know, it's come at a very good time, because I know that the PPI Ignite network is also doing similar things. So it's in tandem with that. And I look forward to developing that and hopefully having some progress report maybe the next time we're speaking.
Yeah, it certainly is going to be an interesting couple of years in terms of PPI in Ireland.
Sure.
For everyone.
Yeah.
I don't believe there's any further questions. If anyone has a burning final question, now is the time. Otherwise, I might just thank all the speakers, Edel, Eve, and Roisin. It was brilliant to hear you all speak today, and thank you very much for all the interesting presentations and all your work in this area. So I can't see any final questions, so I think I will end it there, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much for sharing, and thank you so much to all the speakers and everybody for attending. And if you have any thoughts or suggestions for any future seminars that we're doing, I'm just popping the link there to an evaluation form in the chat, and I'll send it to you in email as well. Any suggestions that you have will be very welcome. And thank you very much again to Mark and to all of our speakers and to everybody for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.